Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to the PathoSans Good to Know Food Safety Series, multi-part educational series to improve safety in every phase of the food and beverage life cycle. Each episode will present where and how food hazards can occur and how industry experts are combating them. I'm Ken Campbell, and I'm the chairman of the Food Safety and Sanitation Panel, consisting of panel advocates, activists, and industry experts. Dr. Detwiler is regarded as one of America's leading food safety advocates and is one of the most well-known, respected, and accomplished people in the food safety industry. Darin and I passed crossed about 6 months ago after I was inspired by his story in the Netflix documentary Poisoned. Within the documentary, I was truly inspired by the story of Darin Detwiler and his family. Throughout the documentary, we learned from various industry experts how we grow our food, how we process our food, how we make our food, and how food is consumed. And with that, I'll turn it over to Darin to tell a little bit about his background and his expertise in those four areas. Darin?
Ken, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure and quite honestly an honor to work with you and your team over the last several months. And I know we have some collaborations ahead of us. The documentary was able to not only highlight my story that happened 30 years ago in terms of the loss of my son, but a lot of the work I put into this is built on my career. At the time of my son's illness and death, I was actually in the military. I was a nuclear operator of a propulsion plant on a submarine, and I was a quality assurance inspector. And I know that had nothing to do with food, but the transition, inspired by my son's death, put me on a path where I've literally been the professor, the author, the keynote speaker. I've sat on different panels with the USDA and the FDA, and I'm even currently the chair of the National Environmental Health Association's Food Safety Program Committee. It's like this Venn diagram where all these different activities and involvements overlap and give me the ability to not only build but to act on these different perspectives and voices I'm able to contribute, all in the name of essentially still being a father to my son and trying to prevent other parents from living with a chair forever empty at their table.
We heard from many different stakeholders, and within the documentary, it highlighted many different voices with different experiences, and they all dealt with food safety in different ways. Is that something that you feel comfortable expanding on for us?
Ken, you're exactly right. You could see this in the documentary that not everyone had the same voice, if you will. You can even see a shift in my voice in the documentary, and I think that not only does this exist in real life, but even my career path that I shared shows this. I think the first phase is just awareness, right? There are those who are aware and those who are not. So just being aware of these issues, aware of the failures, aware of the steps that have to be taken, aware of the consequences, that's step one or phase one. Next is ally. Obviously, you can be aware, but you don't care, right? If you care about it, then you will be an ally, not only to the people who are doing this work and the companies that are prioritizing this work, but even the solutions, the policies, things of that nature. Um, the next evolution, I guess, would be definitely the idea of being an advocate, where you're actively promoting. You're not just saying, hey, I agree with this. You're taking steps to promote this, to implement, to ease some leadership in terms of what you're doing in this kind of four stages of the food safety spectrum, in terms of how you are perceiving and acting upon this information. The final one, and again, you see this in the documentary, and you can see this in my career, is activist. This is when your voice is the loudest. This is when you are saying, I want to communicate this to policymakers, decision makers, to the public even. And this was an opportunity that I had in the documentary, not only to make sure that this information is heard, but I have to tell you, I just recently got a message over LinkedIn from a woman in England who said that she saw the documentary, and what I said in the documentary, her own son went through, but survived a horrible ordeal with E. coli. This is the first time that she's ever been able to make reference to anything that tells the story about what her son and what her family went through. So, again, the impact on those in the industry, even the impact on consumers and those who've been victims, this is where being aware, being an ally, being an advocate, and being an activist plays a significant role.
Boy, Darin, with your background and all of the many hats that you wear, when folks ask me about what you do, I'm usually having to say it's more like what you don't do within the food safety arena. But where you're really driving the future of food safety is within your role as a university professor and speaking to the next generation of the quality assurance and safety directors at these food processing facilities. So with that in mind, I'd really like to hear your thoughts on our webcast series, which covers four phases of food safety. You know, the first one being growing.
Yeah, I mean, we all have to start at the beginning of the spectrum there. Here's where we see everything from whether you're talking about the raising of animals to the growing of plants from seeds, right? He- Here is exactly where does this all start. What's also exciting is that it's not necessarily traditional or historical. There are some new movements here, even most very recently, the growth of the controlled environment agriculture, or CEA, industry, whether we're talking about um, greenhouse grown or shipping container, vertical farming. There are so many new ways that technology and practices are developing and expanding in this area. It's exciting to see.
Right, all new innovative ways of doing more with less, and hopefully doing it safer than traditional as well. So from growing we move on to processing. Can you elaborate a little bit there?
Right. We don't just take raw agricultural commodities now. We have to process it into ingredients in many cases. Here's where we're taking, meat and poultry carcasses, excuse me. We're rendering them, seafood processing. There's many grains even that have to be processed before they're actually usable. And this is nothing new. What is new about it is the various procedures, the SOPs, and the policies around how this is done. And quite honestly, even some of the definitions that the FDA had to change over the last few years with the Food Safety Modernization Act in terms of how modern processing really has changed things.
Great. And as we move on from processing, now that we've got a processed commodity, how do we make it? Right. So that's the next step in our phases.
Yeah, we've definitely grown into a society where we look for ready to eat foods, commercially packaged foods, whether it's baking food ingredients, making it into a great recipe and having it such that we don't have to make it at home, or making it such that it's very easy for us to put the final steps into it. And of course, we're talking everything from food to even brewing and beverages here. This is probably over the last several decades the largest growing segment of industry. And I think it's important to note again that change. What are we seeing? More Americans are buying food that is manufactured or prepared outside of the home than they are spending money on food that they will prepare themselves.
Yeah, that's interesting how the tide has definitely changed where folks want it ready to eat. And as we move forward to the final phase that we're proposing, it's certainly my favorite phase, and that's the consuming phase. Um, if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. I mean, everyone's a consumer. It's not like the athletes versus the fans, and the two are, don't overlap, if you will. Everyone consumes, and it's uh, the nourishment is obviously essential to life, but food is part of our culture. Food is part of the fabric of our life. It's how we tell stories. It's how we bond as friends and families, even. And this doesn't just take place at the home. We're talking about food service, restaurants, hospitality establishments, food trucks, so many different ways in which people are consuming food. And quite honestly, it's this is where stories are told, and where many people say that this is such an important part of our culture.
So what I'm hearing here, we've got our four phases of food safety, and we certainly have four stages of stakeholders. How do you see us connecting these as we move forward with the series?
Well, before I talk about how we move forward with the series, I have to admit what I've already seen with PathoSans is the idea that the way that you partner with industry stakeholders in these different four phases, you're not just interacting with retail or restaurant. You're interacting with stakeholders within these different growing, processing, manufacturing, and obviously at the end in terms of retail and restaurant. But I
Darin, that's a
see
great point,
you.
and I missed that. That is a great point, especially with all the new innovative opportunities that we had at each one of these steps. To your point, from CEA to baking to processing, there are partnerships all along in each one of those areas, all looking for a safer, more sustainable way to bring food safety to their environments and their clients.
Well, and what I've seen you do already is that, you know, you let's go to those four phases. There's an art of building awareness. There is the partnership to the point where you have allies, you support them, they support you in this mission. you know um you go in sometimes as the advocate, and sometimes you come out and they become the advocate. You may be advocating for a solution, they're advocating for their mission, their next stage, the answer to solve their problem, kind of a thing. And then when you look at the idea of a partner who now becomes the activist, they're taking the lead in terms of, this is why we do this, this is why it's so important. I see that in the true partnership that you have with your stakeholders.
All right. So, Darin, can you tell us why you decided to take this journey with us and host our webcast series?
Great question, Ken. To In all transparency, I have to admit, as much as the work on the documentary was great, I have to be aware of the fact that I've been on stage a great many times talking about, interviewing people asking about the documentary. And some of the comments I've heard are that there are other voices that weren't shared, or at least weren't shared enough in the documentary, and that the documentary focused on the problems and the risks, but it didn't focus a lot about solutions. I'm hoping that our collaboration on this series will allow us to not only look at the different phases from the farm to the fork. We talked about growing, producing, manufacturing, and consumers. To look at those stakeholders that are either they already are there, or they're becoming aware, they're becoming allies, or they're demonstrating how they're advocates, or even activists in food safety. But I think more importantly, talking in this series about the risks and potential solutions, and how these different stakeholders at these different phases from the farm to the fork really need to uh, engage in the discussion and discourse over this, but explore those resources and those solutions that are out there.
So, education for the solution.
Exactly. And quite honestly, perspective and reflection and hearing from the stakeholders who are literally in the trenches working with this in terms of either what are the possibilities, what are their findings, what are their successes, and I think that that ends up becoming the best kind of way to bridge, just leaving it out there as, hey, there's all these risks out there, and saying, but here are some solutions on how they can minimize some of these risks.
Wow. Well, thank you, Darin. You certainly got given us a lot to think about today. I want to thank you for your time and being part of the webcast as we move forward. Also, thank you to all the viewers. And we thought this would be good to know, and I encourage you all to take a look at the links on the screen. We've got a link to PathoSans.com that includes our case studies and various articles about food safety and more. Also, links to Dr. Detwiler's contact information and my own. Looking forward to our next episode. Until then, thank you for joining us on Good to Know.